Good morning or good evening, Tash Delek. Today, I wanted to first check in if you were able to do your homework about sleep. I wanted to hear what your reflections were, if you were able to get some answers to those questions. And then we will talk about neurotransmission.
나버서 강가트시텔레스 삼지슈보다 냠도 가성님만 건도 되는 것만 돼 처벌가가 낭종스나 요와스 니당제요 낭종시 대단 대역이 낭종 낭토송에 낭토스나 대단 대외 공사로 가리요 지와 가리요 양 낭종기 주변도 가리가리 충성스.
So if you the homework questions I asked you to look at were how could someone sleepwalk? What is sleepwalking and when does that occur? Do you think you have any answers? We can ask different folks to share.
나버서 전수표야지라 어디 뒤뒤 낭종기 지와디 가래스라나 니 후디 니 공부별 드라이스도아 니도야지 당어도 니를 라긴다 니는 마세 제니야 공부별 드라이스야만 도되기도 sleepwalking 이 아니 컨디션이 용기여래 이 가르래 이 컨디션이 용기여래 아니 디다 제여기 아니 양지 소소스 공수유배 양 심주 따지는 제배 예전도 근데 중요해요.
Well, Tapke's video is on, so I'm going to ask him.
나머지 시바강가 배 가서래 년진한 생민도 빠빠샤샤 탑게라 동리신이 아마 부조적이도 사건 조리스.
I don't know much.
You don't know.
Yeah, but yeah.
But Gillian, may I suggest one question?
Yes, please.
Yeah, sure.
Ask Tabgela if he has ever been caught sleepwalking.
Yeah. Well, Tapke?
No. But yeah.
Then also Tabgela Kadishuatilla. And then Kona ni nano kumba pe de genuine best ni sibe chef the ton your best
So sleepwalking is more active. It happens more in children. It's very common in young children.
I see.
Less common as you get older.
I see.
And then chena ni jo javadi ni nano kumba pe javadi manche lo shebetor yungu yores ya lo gel gen rudi ti yunga de nyun lu yores.
I also see Choyang. Choyang, will you tell me anything about sleepwalking or acting out dreams? Do you know?
I don't have any experience in sleepwalk, but I had seen when I was young. My younger brother always he was sleepwalking. So my father, always is kept with some string on his body. But when in the morning when we talk, my father told him, he was sleepwalking, but he can't believe. So he don't know anything about it. So it's always, it's also is good lesson to learn what happening in his brain or to him.
Yes.
Tanda chola sunga chena chola rangla dendegi ni jo jeba dendegi nyamyo mes ina ya chungdu kabla konangi kumje pinje chungachi kon ni do sta jegres tikepdi ene paragi tichik sabsab cheya dondala konda ni do tabata jegres tabata je ani tuya ji goloro mo je donda sai de ya lan yong de ani khala sa kabla chana khasan de ni do japsuma se labdi ani kai cheya 제가 게임에게 밖에 선한 거는 선한 주님에게 용 선한 주님에 되는 니네스 세브차도 이제 오늘 캔사버시디 디디 간데스 용구여도 레벨 약간 가르치기여도 스텝인데 Gillian, may I share?
Yes.
I'll to share you. We were in school young. People would not just sleepwalk, they would sleep run.
Yes.
Yeah, and it would be something. We would all hear the thudding sound of them running, but then they would go somewhere, but somehow They were in the sleep. They were not awake.
So
Wow.
what you're describing is might be two different sleep stages.
Mm-hmm.
During slow wave sleep, this is when I described if you wake up out of slow wave sleep, you are disoriented, you don't feel normal. And when you try to wake someone up who is sleepwalking, they don't know what's going on and they are not alert. But during dream sleep, people can act out their dreams, which is different. So they're two different phenomena. So when you act out your dreams, it's very different from sleepwalking. They're two different stages.
Taking
May I share? Okay.
taking ngaranzu nyamnyo share de la ngas loka yebe kabla puguso te shenjen pusi shenjen mangbo yorba ni zhe jabgen sa wo ni nang lo la jing ka chou yama ju du mangbo shira yores ni nang ko ba chi ko pe ma yin ba ni nang lo la pe de du sten ni nang lo yin ba kan shi la ju xia chen le du gen lo chi de tong ya mangbo yes di shi di kong ge de la pe chi riba ni yores ni ma se be tong ne gujo jagen de ni riba ni yores chik de khasang anzu shue de slow wave negabla pna chik khasore lebe gi lap gi jwe di tebu yebe kap la ni ko be kap lebe lap tebu yebe kap ni kap ni kang la ni ya ni sebe na ko ni le bet madang mi za ni tik sara se ra che tende chig de sti ju de sleepwalk di ni ju je di peji khasore ni khasore level up tebu yebe kap ki nedanji investor sungudo di ma yebe cheni ni kuben milam tang nega gi ni nega so yang gujo jayo res kan milam tang ba de ani liberang ngwe so chawya chi bi ni kan la ne kap la gujo jayo chi ko de nangdong gi ne su pet khares lo khares
So may I share?
Please.
So my point of view, I don't know it is accurate or not, but I think it is due to the GABA. So the GABA stops our activity during the night. Even like when we are thinking during the night is same as day, but GABA stops our muscles to move. But
Yes.
In the sleepwalk case, GABA doesn't like work well as normal.
That is almost exactly right.
Thank you.
tanda kusho stanzen ki sunga chena di ni nang la gujo nilam ta yang chen gujo jam ho de che de gaba di states chen gabe ne dan ne chen di gi en gujo ja gi masal gujo ja de zola ane khasore tamda chi gi yores di chen gujo ja tu ya ma dis ina ya sleep work che kabla ni kal ko ba pe kabla di gaba gi 당진의 어디 도스 레르 침바 덴데 토니 인사리스 송송딜라 갤라기 디 페제 송야주 차상 덴바리스 도스 직 노소도 되는 데 유사리.
Can I say something? Very
Please.
brief one.
Yes.
Yes. I heard a very, some sort of strange story. Actually, while we were having a discussion with Russian scientists and students, one of the Russian scientists told us a story, something like an adult was actually in a sleepwalk and he was holding a knife and accidentally, or maybe whatever, he killed her daughter. And when he was awake and he was holding knife in his hand and bloods, and he didn't know anything what he did. And then, people brought him to the court, brought him to the court, and they didn't find any kind of motive. And so he was, acquitted and some kind of, considered innocent because there's no motive behind it.
Yes. This is happens. This is Geshe, do you need to translate for?
Yes, I need to. 안다 기세 로저라게 로저 성불라기 근데 중요한 젠나 그나저다 러시안기 세리버데 다 톨랭체베 갑질라 니 러시안 세리버지기 아니 내주지 시에서 이 가래서나 미야 로네야 게임 야 달러 수행타니 애들 차사니 차사버지 아니 니 되자버지 내주 중제 니 되자베 갑라 아니 라과라 지킨 예버지 돈이 니 되자버지 니 되자면 니 그래 나로라 니 레마세베 강라 아니 랑기 암지 이미지입니다 어텔 뒤잡지 아니 세니
What I want to show is
wait. Seni. And Seni, Sani, the Lang, you can't Lang do Langa, Tia Kiki, Tila was some sort of Lang, and Til Permas Chagi has Mazin which within the New Chicken Lange. I should go and Tim to Chigachi to do Gala, and the Tim Nalola, Corona, never okay, careful to because the Corona, the day Chedunian say, going on over the day, you have a number of good mathematics. Yes, Gillian.
so on the slide, the blue trace is the brain activity when you're awake. The red is when you are in deep sleep. Sleepwalking occurs in the red or deep sleep. This is where you would sleepwalk, which means your brain is not like it is when it's awake. So it's not.
the party tension alone, party Tambuki, any Mobuna, you're digging Kasore, Kushe Tombudoa, Kushe Sabodoa. They every any Sevakabi, any Lebe Labki, any Labjugi remotes. The name of Babjamoa de la Lapta, Kaso, Darban Tombo you can. Darban Tombo you can, Maui, your deputy, new to book of a negores. Isn't Namgyal, and in New Jersey, the new to book up in Negor Chungioris. Did you do level Labgi, Dredi, Hajangi, Darban Tombojene, Gabo Shuji, yes, Levergi, any Tombosene, Lagacia, the Sigio Maris.
So when you are asleep, in deep sleep, your brain activity is very different. And if you are sleepwalking, you are not aware of what's going on and you won't make the memory of what you're doing. You are just following through the steps that your body knows how to do. So you can walk, you can even run, you can open the refrigerator, get a meal, eat, but none of that is golden, just repeating behaviors that you've done before.
Jenny, and I need new Kubeka, we need to get the new Tubuki Nega Quantigioris. You do level like Unimaja the Malate, Chedan, Junding, Ni 7 Nega will let Chedan, the Unimadavine, Correlega, Dura with the best Tavares. Did you do G Negaso? Would you have competent to be in a day? Oh, didn't see a coming soon to coming soon the neck of the car, I worry, but the great. Any coming soon, Jack, someone sure I didn't. Oh, Jenny. Jenny need to be able to cook the young user, need to be negative level, legacetan, the new 7 negative level legacetan, and Mendoza, and the comes to good Jagi in a competent doing a Jushan Lugi in a and it's Chagam and a coach here, the color sour engine, Jessica, the tail, Shisu.
So earlier we heard about GABA, which is inhibitory and it slows down or stops our neural activity. So that is usually what happens when you're dreaming. Your body is paralyzed because it has been shut down by GABA.
Jundu ni tubu kubeka kabla ani gaba sa de tanda inju kasore da lubu ki chanel soba tende ki gujul godom chebe negabjila seksigi ora sinza gujul godom cheshagi yosan te negabsu chita tu gujul de kari jabgi ni de jabe to kari yungu yana 균대네 류보코란데 공시 이부터 아니 류보코란단 제베 아니 가서 주거로 버지기 내가 제가 뒤에 왕기 류보 아니 치다도 video japshabata the exhibit Yungi model. Because Lebata Nisu Sangbon of Jig Tony Devata and Yungumesa and Chan Yungi Maris. The Gabadi Koregi Neran Korana inhibitory city Domjegi negatives. Ya Narsteve negative, Mardombe negatives.
So I wanted us to use that to think about how many processes or how many steps there are to keep things normal. So there's so many ways things can go wrong because there's so many steps involved in the process.
아니 이제 방림도 뭐지 가져주지 되어요레스. 지금 어제 해야지다. 방림디 뭐지 최배 더네. 아니 니 투부께 갑리네리 니 저게 갑리네리. 아니 근데 갑라 아니 가리가리 마상부터 하고야 개발 연구레스.
So for today, what I wanted to talk about was neurotransmission. How does the information outside get in, and then how does it connect all the way through? How many different connections does the information go through before you have an action?
전에 다른 가지다 가사기 계시셔야 돼. 경영 계시셔야 되네. 잡았다니 계시셔야 돼. neurotransmission 콜시기 is 왕제 진동 자와 콜라. 왕제 진동 자와 콜라 시에네 아니 친 체진도 나는 수두당 가지 두기요래. 될라 야렌 조당 가지 지기요래. 야렌 조부터네 아니 지칠 따야게 아니 지 남규를 가르쳐 준비요래. 대나라 지기 림버도 가리가리 그래서 대화요래. 대
So here we go. I think I have this in Tibetan. Yes, they should look familiar. These are slides from the summer intensives. And so this is the year 3 slides. So some of these will look very familiar.
lorim sunbe lobsen yaga yatu choguyo ba didi pijucheagi lorim sunbe ani nyentadires.
Okay, I lost my screen. Let me bring it back. This one. Yes, this one. Yes. So, oh no, this is the English. Am I showing you the English or the Tibetan? I can't see.
The slides are in Tibetan.
You are seeing Tibetan?
Yeah.
Okay, good. But I am not seeing what you're seeing, so I need to find that screen. Where is that screen? Come back. I see. Where is it? Come here. Share. Okay, I don't know.
It's the same.
Yes, good. Okay. So this is what I'm interested in talking about today. 2 neurons that communicate with each other. And then we will go into the little bit of detail about how this information gets from one neuron to the next neuron to the next neuron.
And once tazu ni and the once tazu ni che di parula chik dalen cholen do kande chigi yemeti tene ani once tazu shimbala yan dalen cholen che once tazu penjun ki dalen cholen che tan ko nis.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you to go into breakout rooms very quickly and come back and tell me what are the most important things a student would need to know to understand the process from here to here. So just come back with whether it's neurotransmitters or chemicals, ions, anything, any information at all that you think if you have to teach, what would the students need to know to understand from here all the way to the end?
Then and the want to need that one, want to need the name, go the name, and the name June, the name on the Sasu Shimbaja, the name, dig June Pandra, that answer or Te Parula. 아니 가서 유림지 주고도와 유림지 로고도와 유림 대나로라 아니 지가 하장하게 계신 분이 이야기 자신으로 가리가리요래 아 지기 자활 명단은 디그레 양지 대나로기 가서 자신 연계기 지금 뭐라는 데기 명다운데 따는 디그 가리네 제야리 저도 제야이
So 5 minutes, you will be in your groups, your vocabulary, information, anything at all as the teacher that you want to make sure your students know so that they can understand this process.
쟤는 아주 까망아야인가 아니 루카스도 그 시작이 디디 나바스 저도 나야 돼 아니 나바스 계시 근데 디 내준 디 콜 럽티 나고이나 럽티 나왜 갑라 럽투 소랑 뭐저 개침부진 도도 텐덴션이 뭐저 제 거야기 차세 가리가리래 디디 다다는 디 다팅기 규림 나로 개침부치부 내주 가리가리면 디 뭐저 가서 문진 쳐야 되겠어.
Okay, we're back.
So
I would like to hear reports from your rooms. What did you talk about? What did you cover?
제니 루카스기 아니 고작지기 루카스나 가리가리 랭로 중소 디스로나스
Yeah.
My daughter wants to say hi, Abigail.
Oh, that's not good. What's her name?
Abigail.
Oh, Abigail, so nice meeting you.
Abigail, hi.
Come
Good
and
to see
say
you.
hi, Kimberly.
Nice to meet you too.
Oh,
Nice to
thank
meet
you.
you.
Hi.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me start just few words. Behalf of our group, what mostly the Gen Serimpunzo told. So he was says two things mainly important to, first of all, the electrical transmission and chemical transmissions. And the electrical transmissions are happening just, just with neuron itself. But between next neurons, most important one is chemical transmission. And also they have a really important two chemicals, which is the potassium and the calcium. And then also very important to have to mention is make sure next the neuron has receptors. That's also important. And also make sure then there's some sort of, recycling. Otherwise it's going to run out. So there's a recycle process, reuptake, or, somehow it's going backward. And then there are also inhibitors, I don't know how to say, inhibitory and excitatory, two different kind of, activities within the chemical. I think that's all. Yeah.
Oh, Jenny, can tabgelagi. Nike Gudua. No, can tabgelagi. Kishi tabgelagi, and the Conan Rukadi Kusajuje, Nezu Sungajilla. Ne, Datin Tayagi, Tindi, Tindi, ne, number Tony, Logu Nabajika, the young Nabatini, we are this. Then alone the way you can get the Sashabina, and or the Loguda and the Yugi the Tinse. Logu the Jindi, and once it has to Chigi and Gon and Juba to do it, the Loguris. One that has Chigi Nell and nation, but the one that has but the part tag and the Tindi, and the U number now, Jauris. The U number now tag and the U de la Geshe potassium and calcium. Calcium said that to take out of it. The and told the way they any Zedris. This you do to take talk that part Duella, Tapagaleviala, and Pajodella, receptors and Nelembe Chashidicores, Nelemba Chasangoris. The dig Nelemba, and that is the dig number ranging number Chimbala Tene. 안 도시 동네세야 될라야 다디 주 거래제지 거래 capture해야지 capture래야도 보지다 capture 배주해야지 다시 거래면 되면은 즉 당장제 반도장제는 인stead 그래서 이제 될라 pre-abstraction 아니 챌린지 잡아지 된다 봐요. 아니 대인하고게 아니 먼저 침받듯이 이 먼저 침받서로야나 아니 가서 제 가서래 제 저의 되게 제 돼서 지금 리더 조니어래 지금 고동게 넘버지 다 지금 말구행게 넘버지 니어레스 어떤데 돈에 안 내가지 안 지기어레스 어떤데 소소 Yes, Gillian, I'm done with the group first report.
Another group Shiva Ingela. From group 4. Sorry.
Hello, Gillian, are you there?
인터넷에 대하고 싫으면 또 소패지 인터넷에 직접 제보다 기테네.
네, 당연 직송샤나 아니 이 랍샤나 두즈 마 소아마로 지그와 지고래 경기 다른 속으로 야 다들 뒤주고로 가지 송다.
경원데.
So in our group, like we discuss about some of them already mentioned by Geshe like synapses and also the reuptake and all these things, but we want to add something about the parts of the neurons, dendrite, cell body, and the synaptics, also the presynaptics and postsynaptics function of the neurons, and also the action potential that occurs within a neuron, and between two neurons the chemical signals occurs, and within one neuron's action potential occurs. So in action potentials there is also like so many deep concepts, but in brief we should know about the threshold and the ion channels gate and sodium and potassium reactions. So that are some of the brief.
Okay, I hope Gillian, you are also listening. And I'll go ahead and translate what Venerable Wangdela just shared on behalf of his group. Jenenge da kusho Wangdela orangi ruhagi kusa shuje ne sungsha bati pa shugi. Di shue nalo la mangbuchi ene tanda kisha tabela sunga di nalo dugudos. Ene ati nalo nguesu mingde mane chashi kashi nalo la. 아니 synapse 왕제 튼섬이 단단데 얘기 진동 자와기 규림 나오는 데와요 레스 왕제 튼섬 대다 아니 제네 아니 왕제 차수 편중 달렌타야 나로기 왕제 차수기 차시에 나로 차샤비나 아니 달렌 차수로 달렌 타봉다 다제 차봉체 네네 대강라 아니 왕자 차수 코라랑이 차시에 나오네 아니 셀 보디스니 차봉류 아니 되네 달렌 아니 따야디 아니 튼섬기 튼섬 왕제 튼섬 바로데 왕제 튼섬 당 제네 달렌 동기에서 뒤나 문진셔야 된다라 아니 왕제 침배 니부 왕제 차수 니부디 직대라 문도 라 문도 왕자 타주다 직디 젠로 왕자 타주신 아니 디인 문진셔야 돈에 아니 다 당당데 데네 오래 데네 다 당백qabla 다친 당당데 왕자 타주 개개 수수기 나로라 다친기 nga라우지 다 다친 타야기 레가 고추 네 아니 탈말레 파기 레가텔라 아니 action potentials in leju university goris 아니 leju university 데 먼저 저 지금 먼저 저 개개 수수기 나로랑 두개요 레스티 나라 실로 하던 거 아니 대단데 여기 중에 거야 지라 템섬 내단데 먼저 저수 삼 커넥션이야 롱기요래 디퍼도 아니 롱마도 되게 돼야기 템섬지열이 섬직무 중구열이 어제는 아니 템섬티 들라 threshold 시리즈 안테탄데 여기는 예두기 아니 예두기 달람 여러분 예두기 율람인데 아이언 채널 같은데 디단데니 디나로 줘야게 제리 단디 문진나셔 나로라 독세가보다 아니 계속 송송하서 Deans. Hello, Gillian. Are you back?
Yes, what did you teach while I was gone?
I wasn't teaching anything. I was just asking one of the representatives for the group to share what they found other than what the previous group shared. And that's what I just finished conveying.
That is teaching. Thank you. For science, that is really part of it. For as you all are becoming the science teachers, sometimes asking the students to think through things and come together and then report back to the group actually helps a lot. So that's an important part of it for us is what do you think you need? And then what can I offer to help pull it together?
저는 단ang ajo nang shaya di any theory ki lobchi chetangi 사실 계신부지 레스 코로나 가래 레스라나 아니 녀당부터 롭투소라 캐나조의 채는 가리 인사레스는 간디슈 컨트롤레 즉 삼술 후부셔야기 고급대 이제부터 기 디수 랑베토네 아니 디 당대네 아니 가는 제베르베 야세시 제르베 제시 제르베 도 제부터네 펜주 가서에 고도 제벤 제야다 아니 공배동야나 디 제야디 나가르도 제대하라 세력이 아니 롭지기 규림 차시 쳐보시레스.
So one of the important things is the action potential, and that is how the electrical signal travels within the neuron from one neuron. Once you're inside the neuron, the action potential is the way that the information gets from the cell body all the way to the terminal.
제니 난다 달렌타야 나로 당기 수야나 시제니 액션 포텐셜스는 레주 뉴버시티 아니 로규기 다치레스 로규기 나축치레스 로규기 다축 다지레 로규기 로그 남베 아니 나축치레스 코란 중세디 완전 타수치기 나랑라 용기여레스 데네 고 칸네 주기에 지 고야게 페나 왕테 가소레 차봉 류네 고수기에는 내만 고수제니 다제자진 쥐네 다제자진 중네 파도 레레 파도 아니 로규 남아신도 되기요레스.
So besides the sodium and potassium, I missed when my internet went out.
You're back.
Yes.
Yeah.
What did they say? Anything else that I missed when I was gone?
No, I just reported. Yeah, they mentioned in the second group. They mentioned, they mentioned the fact of threshold, of course, action potential, and then identified some parts of the mechanism, such as dendrite, cell body, pre and post synaptic cells, and then yes, the ion channel like that.
All very important parts of the system. I'll show you here. That's what I need to bring up. Share screen. Oh, you're not seeing the Tibetan, are you?
Yeah, that should be fine.
It should be fine.
Should be fine. I mean, this is very technical, so it won't matter much.
Well, I can save you the trouble of retranslating because I have the Tibetan one. Let's see if I can find it. So you don't have to. It will show on the screen. Yes.
So in the case of GABA, in both English and Tibetan, it says GABA, GABA.
Yes. Good. Well, yes. So I think the message here is that the message can continue or it can be stopped each along the way. So these X's all show where you can have the message stopped.
When you're saying these X's, I don't see anything shared on the
Oh, you're not saying. Okay, hold on. Share. Where is it? I have lost it.
Just go ahead with whatever is working with the slides. Don't worry about the Tibetan as much.
Don't worry about the Tibetan. Okay.
Yeah, most of them can read English, so they can get a sense.
Perfect, perfect. All right, let me open this back up then. And then I think I should be able to share this screen. Where is it? Getting signals, this one. Yes. Yes. Okay. So we looked at this, and these are all. Yes, you can see that.
Yes.
Are the important parts. Okay. So the information from outside can travel through the neuron by action potential. And then at the synapse is where the chemical neurotransmitters come in. And then the signal can continue. And that happens all the way until you get an action.
any level 차시에 나눠라 quality 예주 도주도 예주 자와도 체네 쇼고 어디 달랭기 야랭기 주대 아니 류기 남주 지 턴도야기 기름저로 디데 배병도 스페셜나 미기 아니 유할 통버디 아니 레벨 나로기 왕자 타수 단다 왕자 타수 지 파텐도 in sensory inputs 두가라 아니 왕초기 가서를 다지 친내 나운수 낭된 제비들와 디기 소르데 네데 가서 내지 대샤브디 아니 왕자 타수 다게기 아니 중내디체 중내디 나 디파도 아니 다게 여기 채팅기 달랜디 채팅기 다디 아니 로규 나로라 로기 림베 나로 인고 그래서 디 액션 포지션으로와 레주니 버들와 레주니 버디 아니 랑기 제유기 왕자디기 넬수 레인주 아니 고 제유기 달라 뭘 표현이 아니 왕자 타수 치마디기 넬파 아니 얘기요레스 아니 데네 아니 양라양 가토레 레주니 버지기 뭐 로규기 다기 뭐 치네 양 중에데 치 노지 치발 때는 다른 아니 류비기 지 샤네르 버지라 아니 샤네다 데베 아니 왕자 지라 랜드 중네 아니 디 기규네 아니 류기 무엇수 구조 잡세 아니 당기 유이텔라 수숭야레 부자자야레 된데기 아니 구주기 친딘 다디 표현 거리스.
So today I want us to review. Here we go. All the processes from beginning until the message gets to another neuron, and we will do that, review it very quickly.
그래가지고 아니 왕자 다팅 자와 tin동 자와던 자와 예부터 왕자 지규라 아니 다팅 근데 주동치기 예매다 되네 왕자 심버지를 봐 아니 타를 왕자 심버지를 봐 주동치야기 주림디 아니
What screen am I sharing? Can you tell me what you see?
It says information flow through neurons.
In English or in Tibetan?
In English.
I have the Tibetan. I'm looking at the Tibetan, but sharing the English. That's
okay.
I did that. Here. That one?
Yep.
Okay. I'm looking at the English for my own use, but I'm sharing the Tibetan to have on screen.
Okay.
Okay. So as you can see, the arrows, information flows in only one direction. So major things to remember, as neurons are sending information, they don't go back and forth inside the same neuron. It has to go from one direction only.
data the mangudo data to manguta data ka kawajasha to data dan dodan tabina 다디기 가르된 게 어렸으나 차진기 규초도 된 게 어렸어. 차진 규약이 초도 가져도 된 게 어렸어. 가져도 가도이네 가져 찍을 반 누구리마도 먼저 타주 찍이 나눠 귤럼도 찍이 나눠라. 차진 배 상하 생이지 야주마 유니가 생인 제요 말했어. 인지민지 예고 그랬어.
This is the next thing I wanted to show you. Can anyone, because these are review, we've gone over this in the summertime before. I think the nuns program even got through year 3. They didn't get to year 4 yet, but this is part of year 3, what we are teaching. Is there anyone who could summarize what this figure is demonstrating? What's the important thing, the important message in this figure?
내가 먼저 된다 때인데 지당은 대시 주기가 그래서 내가 나도 관계 장사를 해서 그냥 전화 소인의 로르스모부터 랩사인자 로르스모법이 업체도 로사리스 인자타 단다디 대샤부티 실샤부터네 나버 수수랑 찍기 당랑 된제 대낭록이 아니 낭된디 닝두 송 도그르베스 찍기 당랑 난다
Losling Sering Punsok, I see your video. Can you share?
Geshe 트리플라 년진한 세기도스 그냥 소로나스
다디나 단다데 전전원들 원세 차지 지네 아니 담아니 세테 아니 로다데 지타 넘버 주 지타 외니 전전 진정 원세 차지 나려야 나세 가만신데 나네 디니 마니 럼바치네 단다 린지기니 뱅오만 중게 와식 넘버 3 시동도스.
Here, what is being shown is how transmission takes place between neurons. The earlier part, the earlier part is the terminal of the previous neuron, which would be the presynaptic neuron, with the message passing on to the dendrite of the next neuron, which would be the postsynaptic neuron in this case, and where the elements are excited, and through that the action potential is raised, generated, and that then is engaged in sending a message to the next neuron.
Very good. So what's the difference between this little one, and this big one? What's the main point of difference between these 3?
단다 응어서 아니 저버지야지라 빠리 디시샤부터네 레몬직도와 레몬 짜가쪽에도 없지 마블도 없지 짜가쪽에도 빙급도 없지 빙급 차교도 없지 디 집어 때문에도와 체중도 데티스 토스제 데티스 마스제 대 하자는 통보도와 대수부대에 가르치는 게 어res어.
Maybe electrical impulse.
La.
But electrical impulse. There is upsurge of electrical impulse.
되게 가르땡기도 있었나? electrical impulse labdi가 로규기 아니 파다.
Sodium potassium 질기라.
Oh yeah. Sodium potassium 시디 비제 다 칼슘 독 말에 비제 다 독세 가비 조르데기 아니 제기 뉴바테단 제베 아니 impulse labdi 판다디 디 ngarsudo ngarda도 any parseki number thing those.
Very good. The important point is that an action potential is what we call all or none. You don't ever have a little action potential. This doesn't become an action potential if there isn't enough membrane potential to get it all the way to an action potential. It's 0 or 1. You don't have a very big one, you don't have a little one. It has to have enough electrical charge to generate an action potential, and if it doesn't, nothing happens.
되게 가르땡기 열었나? 근데 내 가서 파트도 통보 중에까지 아니 렌주 뉴버치 그 두비하기 체 롱거 땡기 열었어. 렌주 뉴버디 딩고인도 가래서 레주 뉴바 아니 중요하지라 터지기 슈디 바사게 요소지레스 가래레슬람나 액션 포텐셜스 레주 뉴바지 다탄다 레주 뉴바 서두가 로주기 다파 무슨 주야기 뉴베체지 롱고와 뉴베체디 체지 야는 체 롱와다 야는 체 말로마도 체 발라 샤도 데제 안 오스도 토스도 뉴뉴도 치준도 랍제 액션 포텐셜 레주 뉴베기 체데라 나지 낭세기 치준도 개 요마레스 코지 체지 롱나 렘브레 말로나 코 용아요마레 롱나 코 용그리 세지 니주 차디요레스 all non 세드레스 야는 얘는 예타 체브레 메네 메타 체브레 모두 발라샤지 개 요마레스 디 뉴버디 아니 파 가서 사야 세고레 디기 뉴바 뿡야기 된다 딩고연기 아니 한다 electrical charge 로기 쿨로기 쿨뉴 아니 기 넘버 땡기요레스 아니 디 셀롱드 땡기 마보 림부디 템버레 디 action potentials 아니 기기요레스.
Okay, so just because we're doing review today, I'm not going into all the details of what channels open and how many sodiums and potassiums move, but that's all part of what you will be teaching. But the general idea I just wanted to remind everyone is we have action potentials, and unless the membrane potential reaches a certain level, nothing will happen. And as soon as it gets, yes?
그래서 나는 14만 루면 제시지기 제시제 나는 능력이 다들도 나는라 아니 가소리 membrane potentials 시디 기바기 뉴버디 청구요 기바 뉴버디 아니 체르지 뭐 중에 딱다 렌제 아니 레주 뉴버디 게 투두 봐도 디 뉴버디 고 산이 되게です데산에 아니 레주 뉴버디 파리아기 뉴버디 깨나 아니 신내 레주 뉴버디 용기요레스.
So that very important electrical signal then at the terminal will release chemicals or neurotransmitters that will be in the synapse to allow the message to cross that gap.
제니 다기 왕자타수 찍기 난기 아니 레주 뉴버케게 바게 아니 기바기 뉴버티 산에 요니 디 산에 아니 레주 뉴버 찍 턴점버도 딱 레주 뉴버 연구 말와 되네 턴에 송대 레주 뉴버 바 요네 아니 제여기 왕자타수 디기 중내 파도 주 아니 중내 파 퇴용디 턴단데 아니 제기 넘버 20 제기 넘버 20 제기 넘버 20 델라 왕자 침바스를 그래 코나 뉴로트랜스미터 라시그레스 코나 아니 로규 가사 제규기 ngobokhores that ngarki dadres dadita logyun 제규 ngopen 대 아니 디제기 왕자 쳐주들 봐 아니 라랑기 내기 아니 넬렘베 숭네 다들 봐 얘기요레스.
So the next thing we want to spend a little time reviewing is at the synapse, there are 3 main steps. And I heard this when we were reviewing what the steps were, right? The 3 main steps are the release of the transmitter, that interaction of the transmitter with the receptors, and then it has to end. So the termination of the interaction, something has to stop it from, or it would just keep going.
Then that during the steps na 방run으로 소리 방으로 림버로 숨 개심을 숨이요. 그래서 숨이 되게 남아서 여기 송야 나로래 태연선스 시대 가래서 되게 다디 아니 원자 탈수 되게 중내되네 달려고 그랬어. 려야돼 아니 지그랬어. 려된셔야 돼. 근데 interaction and the nelen patata dejoshego sensedi on the tasu jamadigi nelen pata that and le shabe le ton che shabe the tin that zeg number yobati dejoshigis dejoshebe gyrimdi parujil sam shagores jugdi shagore jugdi ni 제거를 모두 심바 그 무튼에 도되는 디기야마레스 이자 terminations in leveres.
Okay, so going to do a thought experiment in small groups again. The same groups are fine, Karma, if you can send them back into those groups. But just to ask, if you are a scientist coming up with a drug to treat a problem, where along this step, right, step 1, 2, or 3, where could you manipulate the neurotransmission? Does that make sense?
Yes.
In a general way, if this is the 3 steps that need to happen, where could you interfere with or accelerate the process? Which of these steps? Maybe all, maybe 1, maybe 2, maybe 3. But in your groups, talk about what the differences could be about drugs that would target each of these steps.
전에 단나버서 루가스서 것이 접제 아니 thought experiment 지시하레스 삼류 다가서는 펜진 삼류 다지 시하레스 thought experiment 지하레 삼류 다지 시하레스 그냥 가르쳐고는 나버서 계시 있는 drug 지 냠견도 리뷰 냠견도 지라 아니 지게 가서 제터 지하게 아니 체도 제juk man of yana zeg never so guyuna this where the net said so guyuna and is where they nalola under the you tindong dangi chawa data ni tella nishu taking jigi shuken to kenji in the sores so will then in yam the jet of was. Is the dating the Android Gillian the other day Parim Sum Shevi Bas. So some Subutin alone and some Kawachila and Pejushagi and the Zedi, Yuvatang Tene, and never the Jetovia, Namgyal Jetuguris. That Rimba Sumbutin alone, Rimba Kawa, any. 태주로 제고이나 태주 제세티 가와 제고리 가와 제투그리 가와라 제바나 때네 아니 내단라 주바땅 투그리스 어디 주두나이스 삼료톤이 아니 다제나제 주두나이스.
Okay, so 5 minutes to discuss what would happen if you changed how step 1 worked. How could you change it? What would happen? What would happen if you change step 2? How could you change it? What would happen? So these are all the ways that you can have problems or accelerate.
Yeah, don't do not get in the Sungadi. Remember the Sumi Nalon, remember Sumi Dinalola, Kawala, Jotang Tugres, Jotang winning Jotang Hadistangres. And it's the town what tell at any you nobody, chicken Nubadia. 팔주베 돈에 아니 던져서 제거를 왜 야는 이번 어디 짜베 거네 던져서 제거를 왜 간데 제거를 했어. 제가 이번 수부디 나오네 가와 번주 땅 도그래 땅에 간데 땅 거래 땅 와라 때네 번주 넘버디 인가르 세베 넘버 지그르 왜 야마 차베 넘버 지그르 왜 어두션 조도나야 돼.
Any breakout groups?
Well,
are we back?
Yes.
Yes. I had a very interesting conversation in one room. I'd like to hear what the other rooms talked about.
No.
Okay. So shall I start or I just?
Sure, please.
Okay. In our group, we had a little bit kind of different, versions, and one of our members said we should do the 3rd process, and then I said we should do the 2nd process. But basically, we are same because we all agree we should try to block the one of the channels, the next receptors, which is attached with the next neurons. So that can stop the transmission through. So especially for the addictors, drug addictors, basically they're, continues to releasing whatever the chemicals. So we try to that specific chemical to stop. And the best ways we can do is we try to block one of the receptor channels, and then we'll see what will happen, whether it's effective or not, or what, that's our main idea.
That's a very good idea. Yes, and you're right. You can manipulate it at any of the spots, first step, second step, or third step, and they're very similar. If you can increase or decrease, it will change the way that neurotransmission will continue. So yes, very good.
Well, then tanda Geshe tapela konando rugadi kamusunga nang nangse chik tos shaba desu tos minda shunso ine zawe dadandi ani wansa tasu kungamane chimala su gyudong cheagi 제교기 borsetti della tanginchabo de cabres de kalu kadande kawache가 sunde ani mixkani ani rimbasumbadi de kasore intertermination sati jugdi che de jo jugdi che samda yang dingwemande chik de jo che samda yang pamorangne tamborane inema onde sungama de subete yongkorma june nelembe lenkorma june che sunso anda gelagi dil kalen sunga dela te ganga yabudu ani zawe chena rimbaru sumbu kawaine kari chunjunchila ani kasore juju tanchi tangziru chena ani susu debe ni tenda de chugris rede zawe rede deyogi kasore gyencha kari teta tela hikbe ani chike 태도 제야디 태도 제야디기 아니 양나 믹수가니 말롱게 넘바지라 태도 중재 돼야지다 양나 말세베 넘바지라 태도 제네 중재 된지 써야지 답시 지하고레스.
Okay, you made Geshe translate when you could have said in English and Tibetan.
예다벨라 되면 그메 기지 담들 내가 꾸송아 저랑랑 비교해 이가 송샤는 되게 봐.
Next time, if our teacher says it in English, they can also translate in Tibetan for your classmate. Very good. Let me hear from another group.
Yeah, from our group, we are from group 3. So from our group, also pretty much the same like Geshe Tapkela mentioned. And what difference is we didn't talk that much about the third step. So we talked more about the first steps and the second step. So one of our members gave example about vision. So for if some patient something happened with the vision loss, right? I lost, then if sometimes you can change from the first step, and sometimes you can change also from the second step, because it's more related with the brain integration. When you release some chemical from before you showed us one picture, I look at the glass and then take information and it's sent in the brain and it's integrated in the brain and then releasing and then occurring the action, right? What we do normally. So that's why it's more related with the first step and the second step. So you can change from first step and second step, and then something will happen to our action.
Yes. So sometimes with disease or with any malfunction in the brain, sometimes it's happening at step 1, 2, or 3. And then as scientists or doctors trying to treat it, you go in and try to change back what has happened.
단데 전화기 엔다 권한주루가기 삽주지 송야 나노라 자베 내수 망부지 인다 땡외기 기시타벨라 권한주루가 송야 다부다부두스 네 믹스카네 멘다지 가두스 나 권한주 송겐 치기 아니 림바숨바디 단다 지기 대조 죽지 셰세 삼대 아니 미투제 태도 제고레스 송에 데이터 메튠바 차소 가능한 주 루카디 나노라 림바 당보다 니번이 나노라 바림 당보다 니번이 믹수제 대나노라 아니 지금 유보다야 같이 제고레스니 내주도 되어서 때 간에 됐을람나 그냥 당기 지기 통소의 대화에 냠주로 지메이나 통소의 대화에 냠주디 아니 지기 지기 차진디 아니 통소기 왕배 유네 아니 나는 레벨 나눠라 차진수 당제 당내 레벨 나눠라 대조 제제 제보다 제베 냠주로 지메 온도다나 네 당부대 지기 차진수 레야다 아니 램의 수고대 콜라지 대조시 양식과 디 그림 다나는 믹스우제 아니 탑시 셰비나 아니 타면 중대대 지기 통유 공부될 미베 아니 야렌주단들 주바 사버스탄도 그랬시 근데 이 섬주 중소스 근데 개나기 돼서 칼리나에 나로라 지단에 나세리기네 야는 지기 내가 제단기 류샤시 가야 지기 내가 제단기 더 또스 냠주도 중국도 근데 그네주 가대로 지네 대화 요새디 림바숨가 나는 대화 요리스 이내야 림바숨가 대화 요새 아니 대단 대역이 죄사로 제야 되게 림바숨가라 아니 지게 태도 요행이 탑시지 제야레스 근데 제니 아니 이거 당도 그래스
Does anyone know how cobra toxin works?
number 2 the two cobragi togi legasilani can they yore kingi best
It's neurotoxic, Dr. Judan.
How?
I mean, how I guess since it's a venom, which is a protein, I think it inhibits receptor interaction.
So there is a big receptor interaction, and the specific receptor that it's affecting is acetylcholine. So acetylcholine is important for movement as well as memory. And in this case, if you look at step 1, 2, or 3 that we just talked about, this venom actually makes a big problem for step 2.
And cobra that you took it like a stand body. The Gana Sungachina, 2 Koran Modi protein chenny, Chizech number the Inza Tangeshera saves Shemazo didn't the Yuchi Chixonso. And the Gana Sungachina di Toze di Guju Diatan and Chambala, I should gain sympathy this. The table then the table than Javacheni ni Kazu the acetylcholine receptors Jenny. Kogi shoot Yapsat of the acetylcholine receptor Nelemba Nalog Nelemba Migadi Dila and Topo Tangioris. The day Tangwala Tene any one day Chinton Chavadi too much was Shigiore. The Chene and Jayugi Shane and Kazore. Sharichugioris. Today, Sharichugiore, Legema to Chugioris. Today in the Ribasumganane, Ribanivatilla, Mixucane, Javachagioris, such as Chavachune, Ribanivatilla, Mixucane, Javachagioris. Integration sag, the interaction sag, some della Mixucane, Jetuchagoris.
So what is showing here is if the toxin is the X, it binds here and prevents the real neurotransmitter from doing what it should do. So you can't send any messages because it prevents it from going any further.
But the perinom, someone said, the perinom X, and Kuruka Jeffers to a Kuruka Jeffers, and it corporate dogdigi, and it delapa, and in Jarvogina. Tell a Chinjo Chebe on the Tangina. This Chinjo Chebe, one gate, that could be someday, Danny, at this Hamdella, neurotransmitter 왕들 침박이 제요 왕들 침박 모주 제디 영마주식이 요레스 이 영마주나 대 유네 아니 만로 도구만이스 이 만로 모두 인자 아니 그게 진동 자와디 아니 거기 요레스.
So the interaction is prevented and you cannot have transmission. So that's what you were describing from one of the groups.
근데 인자 interactions 도 내내 바다 대조 제야죠와 대조 거는 제주고야 말이스 내내 바다 토주고면도 또 모두 대조 두고야 말이야 대조 모두 아니 대단 여기 나친디 깨두고야 말이스 진짜 단기 여러 가지 그 순간에 신체제디 텐텐디다 저차디요레스.
Here's another toxin that works in a different way. So this toxin will also prevent proper neurotransmission, but in a slightly different way. This one acts at the first step.
근데 내니 두 개를 민다지요레스 dom다기. dom다 유문하고 dom다 유문하고데 여기 두디 이 아니야 당기네 시제제 가서래 왕즈 침배 자와 왕즈 침배의 오유에 아니 제주 디파 땅마주네 아니 대단데 여기 아니 다친디 아니 규동체를 고견식이레스 네 디레가 시단디 떠스면다레스 내가 시단디 안 당기 리버숨그 나로네 리버 당보텔라 믹수카네 디기 가서래 게견식이요레스 인자 탑시 제고주네 아니 델믹제 제고요레스.
So for this one, what happens with the spider venom is that you release all too much of the neurotransmitter, and so there's no control anymore. The neurotransmitter is just being released, and that eventually will prevent further neurotransmission because everything is being released all at once.
다들 디기 가서 dom다기 도 데이터 제베 아니 지금 냠전 당단데 당기 쉬어는 시제제 림바 당보대단 저와 자기 어렸을 라브바 림바 당보디 르든 제야딘바 르든 제야기 천진디 메투브스 고레스 르든 제세 참될 르든 천진디 아니 더보단 당월 때는 다 천진 제모도 제니 아니 예제디 파 예제디 파 하장기 편심부터는 르샤주고요. 르샤와 인상 대샤벌 때는 아니 디슈고 아니 가서래 가서디 가서래 먼저 침박기 뭐주에 제디 당진 제모도 베이자 아니 그 주경도 제모도 되게 괜찮네 아니 유림대 도보단기요리스.
Okay. And another example is a different disorder, right? This one again at the neuromuscular junction, but this one is a problem with the termination of the interaction. So step 3 is where the problem is for this one.
다들 양 아니 가서래 고갱 서로에는 냠경 넘버를 숨바지레스. 데 나로라 나들디 디임부터 가서래 마슬 당대와 예배 가서래 마슬 수샤네 샤네다 데베 아니 넬렘바 라 도보당당기 네수진부터 디산다디 리버숨바디 나로라 냠견디기 즉 믹도네 게젠세서디 리버숨바디 당기야게 3차이지와 3조제자 터미네이션세 리버지와 리버텔라 아니 게젠체블 때네 그냥 진동 자와라 디치기요리스 게진식으로 디세야디 갈지거스나 and the sodium channels and the buzegi julamjero julamdi kane di kabala tene ani gyurimdela tobotangiyoris.
Yes. So this one is very familiar again, but the process that would break down the neurotransmitter at the end has become a problem and it's inhibited. So then it's unable to stop the stimulation. So it gets stimulated over and over and over.
근데 렘바숨바 데라 대조 죽지세죠바 제조 대조 죽지세데라 아니 가서래 게젠체블 때네 아니 죽파 제주기야 말이야. 죽마 지마도 되게 지기 야구기 림바디 야구기 넘버라버디 무트니 바 대주벌 때네 아니 대 된지 아니야 중대 아니 삼십 belong is.
There's a question in the chat that I wanted to address. Someone asked about the cobra toxin getting the receptor. So the cobra toxin is different from the spider venom. So they're two different ones. The cobra toxin is small enough to get into the brain or the nervous system. And when it gets in, it blocks the sodium channel so that the receptor cannot work. And so when the neurotransmitter is released, it has nowhere to go because it has been disabled by the cobra toxin.
The Tomdagi do data and Jugi to Nibudi Parugi Kebadi Chivatisha di Jugi to the Cobra to the Chunjun Yoris, Kazan Chunjun Yoda, Lebanon left the Yoris, left devil 10 Tigi, and in the Buzegi Julam Jura, Tikagi Yoris, Tikawa the 10, and Tendong was a chimba. You say Lamga the Kasha Yoris, you say Lamga the Kasha do any Tendon Chow to Yoris, or the legend any Godians to Yoris.
Was there another question about the differences between the spider venom and the cobra?
So that is that they do need to check them that they were treated their need to what need Tanjayugi. Number Simbaji to a simple query in bed, current numbers, to a query in bed, to which do him do it.
Okay. Let me put the summary slide here. I think this looks like it. Yes. Okay, with the last few minutes, I just wanted to remind you that the electrical signal within the neuron that causes the action potential is all or none. It's either on or off. If there isn't enough to create the action potential, nothing will happen. But once there's enough, you'll get an action potential. Does anyone remember how a neuron can communicate that it is very active? If there's no big action potential and no small action potential, what is the mechanism that a neuron uses to communicate much activity? You understand the question?
Could you say it again?
So there is no such thing as a little action potential and a big action potential.
Yeah.
All action potentials are the same size. They're either none or they are the same size.
Yeah.
But we still can feel a difference if something is very hot or a little bit hot, or we can tell if something is loud or quiet, or bright or dim. How can a neuron communicate that information if all action potentials are the same size?
That's the Chivish Guya used to muscle. And I was a color now. Once the timber, once the Tasu Jig, once the Simajilla, and chatting, you don't see right? You don't share the once the Tasu Doda Susan and Lola, the day chatting the and in Lejuni Bengola. Gigio, this Lejuni Bafora, Modi, and in Logugi, Nubajiris. The day Lejuni, but Chichania. That because once the timber chicken, once the tattoo chicken, Shimbala, a deeper than a duet, and Tendegi, Datindi, and they use number of chincha, and partake level was. That take you know, and take along a cut lovers in action potential. And the Leju Nibo Korana, Nanseki, and Hajangi Chimbuing, Leju Nibo said, but Hajan does Chunjuing and quality Nanseki, Chijun, we are in Chijima. Kanga said as much and said Chibush that is lover was. The day in Bayina, and I to the most to that in number la, that in Mola, and it you turn on your head, it's how do you know Hajan Sawada, Dot Sawada, Shida Sawa maybe number the day. Gerugine, Hajan get Shimbuda, and I get Chunjuda, Palasha the name of the day, Twaji good was. The chadin the around soil do it and yon minda shooting with the parent or shooting with the red teach conditions on the Strasu pendule Tayagi, anyone Lejun, but the legion of Kajin Webina, and another quiet, any Chiju Hajan Timbuko to Adi, and Yoya did Levation Yungi, one the Tazu Yungu, one the Tazu Nalola, and Yondan Kandiji Wangi, Chitan, Legacitan Kandiji Wangi, Jodala, Maran to Soyon, any number of the Namgyal of the Hajan Pandu Chimpin, talk to the condition Yungi or this.
Yes.
Leju nuba kitang manyong doji. Leju nuba gazo ma apartumna mangbo yonga da nyung yonga jirogi. Dinde jimendo.
Wandela, Kusho Wandela, Wandela is saying, Kusho Wandela is saying that it might have to do with the frequency of action potential. Not that there are differences among them, but there's a difference in how frequently they happen to be activated.
Yes. So the two things in the chat, Tashilamo says number of neurons firing, sum up to signify. So yes, the number of neurons more intense means more neurons are doing it, but also within each neuron, you can send many action potentials. There's no big action potential, but you can send many. And that intensity of the stimulus will be communicated by the frequency or the number of action potentials. So that's one way, is the number or frequency of action potentials. The next way is how many neurons are doing this all together. And so you can get these activity to be communicated by that.
Once Tarsu Kazu Manguchi and Lantayatan, the Wachagu said, Tanging once Tarsu Mangle show you meti, Chitan, and once Tarsu Toda Suzuki, Tin Tangengi, Toda Suzuki, ne Leju Nuba, Kazuki, Doju Chembutone, Tuzu Tundu, Kazu Mangutan Tugudu. Once Nancy, the Chijun Keba Yamare. Kijun Keba Medding, one Leju Nuba, Tuzu Tundu, Kazuman, but down to Gudu. Or Tetan, Tetangengi, and one the Tersu, Kazu Mango, Manglu Kazu, and then the Washadigu. Or Tigi June, Tigi Tone, and the Pagay Musu, Gujen Soriadi, Gujen Leviati, the Gujen Soriadilla, Nansegi, and Chejun Pama the Yonge.
Yes. Good. So within the neuron, the intensity of the stimulus is communicated by frequency between the
Hello.
Chemical transmission can be interrupted or accelerated.
Gillian, I lost you after you talked about the frequency.
So the frequency for within the neuron, but at the synapse, between the neurons, it's about the neurotransmitters and the channels and how you can block or accelerate the signal by any of those three steps. Okay. I know we are out of time, but if you have any quick questions or anything you wanted to address, let me know. or you can always email me. I'm happy to answer questions by email. I'm also on, I think Signal is one of the apps. I'm happy to answer questions that way if you come up with anything.
Then 당연히 다른 교수 다게 땅도도 이나야 넘어서를 지금 통동인데 갑도 레게 잡혀야 되는데 저거들이나 안다 숨는데 그래 데미 그뒤네 저다는데 여비나 아니 괜찮아 아니 로팅이 주네 아니 달래 로팅이 주네 저 나초그레스 데이터도 마세 아니 다게 귤럼 signal said 나로라 갱기 모텔 갱기 디어스 네 타타이스 아니 타타이스는 딜레 되었는데 그래서 즉 저예요 왜
그래서 계시라
no
저지 저지
뭐야 yeah so somebody has a question
나가서 가서래 드르트 포와이나 나가서 둘라 드르트 포와이나 코커서래 나가서 첨바데 칸로 선소아 가리 도래 아니 첨바가 때문에 아니 첼리 잼바가 돈이 아니 가서 나도 나한테 같이 용거였어
가리 도기 주입 도들왜 야
드르지 때 가서 룰라 포와이나 가서 나도 쉬지 당도
어레데
나차 식지 못한다 나차 땅에 됐다 아니 가서 첨바 카피 첼리 나지라 때 집어 용거래 때 자주 잼바가 돈이 용거였어
Yeah, somebody has a question relating to cobra toxin, toxin. In that, when somebody is bitten by cobra, he or she feels pain at that area. How would you explain that pain happening? Because with the toxin working, it ultimately involves blocking the transmission, etc. But then, how come this pain?
Yes, so pain receptors are a slightly different process than the muscle receptors. So what the cobra toxin does is prevents the neurotransmission to move the muscles, so you end up with paralysis. So you're paralyzed. But also at the surface where the contact is made, your skin is broken and there is a foreign invader, something different. And so your immune system starts to respond to that injury. So the pain is really about something foreign coming into your body. And it would do that for anything at all, whether it's just a little drop of something or pepper or anything that is different. Your pain receptors will recognize it and respond to it. But it's a slightly different mechanism from the paralysis.
And then the 주기 또 쇼벌 때네 아니 지금 도보 대단지여 디 주기 도랑기 아니 게겐시서디 한다 샤네다 제베 넬렘발 게겐제기요레스 디 샤네다 제베 넬렘페 니 가서레 진동 차와될 거긴 소고요레스 디제니 아니 구조 땅마도 비체니 루부 샤워 해야지 루부 샤워 해야지 여기요레 패럴리시스 해야지 여기요레스 레데 디 세베캅라 그 샤워로지라 안데 여기 빡빡 사제디 만로지 카로지 세제 만서 저기에서 데라 자와 메데게기 뇌제 셴바데 슈고라 때네 아니 디낭로기 ngazu titan de yesoro ngazu lubinologi ani 가서래 nego 누바 그봐 immune system nego malala 견제 제발 때네 아니 나수 이거야 이제 나수 용해 되는데 주유기 소제부 찍어다 만다봐 찍어를 마임바 대마임베 내가 신바만 문노래 수부 빠빠다 저차네 즉 제백갑라 소개야 이거 니네 소개야디 가두이니 태걸기 가서래 자샤 대당 내수 대당 제가 이밍에 봐야 말이스나 주요 소재도 차샤비나 그 대화 자세히 샤네기 넬레발라 젤니 아니 게진시야 시기어마도 나수기 넬레바죠 나수기 넬레바다 대화 태가요 말이스 나수 용해데 나수기 넬레발라 도보단계기 뇌제 심바직 실로기 뇌제 심바직 단데 같이 샤여베 아니 내가 뒤 배주 땅걸 때는 안 나서고요. 됐어.
예시 랑아 컨디션 쇼시 기시 되게 나
Gillian, there's another one.
Yes.
Yeah, Suranas.
저도 제 단기 아주 god라 드링기 진짜 고추주 선발라 아주 디소서 아니 아주 이나라 야모 되지 아니 이 투볼로 내가 수레스라
Ole.
아니 디간들라 아주 이나라 야모 주주 선발라 아니 당로나라 야마 아니 잘라 레자 디도 롱초에도 참 지기요 레스til라라 야 아니 이 투볼로 내가 수양 아주 디 갈라오레 근데 얘는 아주 유튜브로 내가 장로 가와 여바당 장로 ನಂಗೆ 잘라도 간데 여버도 사상 하고 해도 간데 사고고 얘나셔 아니 뒤시디요 말아 이게 통해다 저 유매다 돈디 걸 컨디션.
So here's a question related to what you shared earlier regarding sleepwalking, where you said that it is occurring during deep sleep, during which time brain activity is very, very different than the normal.
Yes.
And it almost seemed like saying that there would be no active perception, no active recognition, whatnot. But then that person happens to go to the refrigerator and chooses one particular thing. So he or she should be knowing where the refrigerator is, what is the refrigerator, what the food are among them, which one is which, and then chooses that. And that seems very clear that it obvious seems that there is a perception, active perception involved, and thus that related brain activity should be active.
So there is perception involved, and they are perceiving and they can see and do, but they are not aware of it. So the parts of the nervous system that act out are not the same parts that plan out. And so the planning and remembering are different during sleep than when you're awake. So when you're awake, it all works together. You plan, you act, you remember. But when you're asleep, they're acting in different ways. So you can still do things, you can still act, and it still makes some kind of pattern based on what you've done previously, but it doesn't follow along the awareness where you recognize what you're doing. You're just doing it because that's the pattern.
Okay. 이제 된지나 보라 그냥 괜찮아요. 그냥 내 캐시버 쪽이 된다라. 인지 줄이나. 걔나 갈수소람나. 니 두부 내가라 아니 단다디 니 되게베디 니 나로 고베ben도야디 용기요레스. 이나야 디디 perceptions 다 나도 난주다 뒤셰스라 그이바다 갑도데 뒤셰스 줄이데 딱다 되게면 가시데 perception 더부터 요래 이나야 awareness 요마레스. 이켄도 perception 요레스 통모데 요래 통계 요래 샤라 가르가디 통계 요래 이나야 디디레 슬랍제 게 디치기요 당게 딜 뇨기요 섬산로지 랑기 랑라 아니 세부 직 학고베 림바디 요마레스 perceive 지기요래 aware 요마레스 인나 인 데데게 나몰라 직 내가 가르치기 있는 제야디 용기 요래데 디 제야디 인고엘라 디 지기인다 섬산로 최시 등에 넣지 여러분 디 되지 매버서르지레스 맞ungö수 니 세베갑 내가 세베갑이나 최시 등이야 띵번은시 응ö수 랑랭게번은시 디 제베인 선배 전바용이야 아니야 대단데 니도 전바 전바용이야 디 강간냠도 제르네 아니 내가 지금 슈기요레스 이 아니 슈벌라 때네 지 방문다고지기 드지 셰어요데 니 투부 쿠베갑게 아니 니저 제베갑라 텐데게 자와데서 폐제 낭패주게 하장게 내도 전부 가요 말이스 대낭로라 지 때는 드르부지 통해요 때 드디 야고지 대침비네 야지 릴럼더부지 파 대제 도단도 뒤에 매버지요레스 is the perception pet meora marine awareness yo maris.
Geshla, I can always see the parts of the story where you are saying what I said. I can always tell when you're translating that part.
Thank you.
Okay, was that answer okay? Acceptable?
Yeah, and there's a lady in the background.
맞대바라 perception the awareness 지 개발도 약고 그렇지만 아주 뒤시 니가를 되게는 그냥 니가를 뒤시도 오지 차도다.
Alright. So
좋은지게 개발도
yeah, 대하고도 Gillian, could you just quickly explain what you mean by separating perception and awareness?
Okay, an example would be if there's a cake in the fridge. If I am aware of what I'm doing, I will open the fridge, take out the cake, cut one slice, which is enough, and eat it. If I'm not aware, but I'm just following the motor pattern, I will take the whole cake, eat the whole cake, and have no memory that I ate the cake because I didn't plan it. I didn't think it through. I wasn't aware of what I was doing. I was just acting. You know, you can act. You just follow the actions. And so the action of take the cake, eat it, it's an action, but it doesn't connect with a plan or with an awareness, which is why it's so dangerous. So people will walk out into the street and a car will hit them because they're not planning, they're not thinking ahead, they're just following the motor pattern, the program.
So they don't even recognize that it is a refrigerator, that this is a cake.
It's hard to explain how they are just following a pattern that they do. So if it was a new house, actually you see sometimes if older adults or folks who start to sleepwalk, they might use the bathroom in the wrong place because they're just following the pattern and they'll go into the wrong room and they'll take off and use that because they're not planning it. It's not really aware. It's just the motor pattern.
Okay. I think that's very helpful to kind of get some kind of a conceptual understanding of the difference between what might be called perception and awareness. This is again that the person who had the page to tiny pages have a telepa again, some of the time when a page is not how the Ravadu. Can it is not Penachashavina and the need in Anola, need to get the Charam catch any. That was 7 on the tongue we name. Did awareness Yamari said the Karesana, Rangi Karichi, but the Rangi Shin to Chigi Mevich, Rangi Hakon, that session to Chigi Meviti, Sigioris. The Mesa awareness Yamaris, Rangi Karisha, but the Rangi Zamasubiti. Temado, where's the part Tagamda Chincha, Langa Dreadi, Subu Kasure, Gujuji. 슈직이 파 대네 구규 잡셔야지다 잡줘야지 마도 가르치기에부터 랑기 잡수신도 지기야 말이스. 배나 차금럽지 같이네 깨그럽지 때문에 온다네 디디 아니 잡셔야지 랑기 가르치기에부터 잡수기 매버디 아니 가래 라와 가와 라와니 없어디 깨깨다 옹알세도디 임바타 옹알세 가리 임바타 디진 잡수기 매버 딸 가리열람나 Narse Lavel Lembina, Tingerse, Narse Imba, Hamagota, the Manu Kazu Sagugi Meta, Mangosana Kari with the Hamago Beta della. This I should do Chazan Sasha with the Yungris, Mother Hortic Third of Che, Jiruji, Samro Che, Chigran to Chaji, Kari Imba the Imba, that situation to Chaj or the Yomaris. Is a perceived that Duganla Tell a team, but do share with Jagi episode members in it. Pejing Lubu Chashi Tonin, Kari Imba the Ton Devasochi, Ton Devatella, and Lubu Guju, Shuki Daje, and tell them there was what it is. Penetration, Kampasawa, and the Chasha, when you came in the need to Java the Yoris, and it's also need to Java the Kampasawa Senina, and Kampatin on Sanju to one car is the Gema, Java is the Manza, and Doge Sanju Pejigi, sort of don't do it. Dosa such a Shibaji, there any Topota, Simatan, and Chen Yungris. You do Dosa Chilla, Sanju Tuangilla, Doya Chita, Doni, Techia, Levati, Cheshava Conchilla, Chesa de Kawaii, Karichi, images Zatsugi Amaris. Is a tilla, awareness, Rangi Rang Karichabiti, Zatsugi Mebiti, Tillisigi years.
Okay. Yeah, I know we're well over time and I know it's late there, but I am happy to answer questions if you email me. And I am thrilled to continue our conversation. Tomorrow we'll be talking about emotions.
And Gillian, are there any slides that you want to direct me to?
I will send them to you tonight, and then
Thank
we.
you so much. Oh yeah, last of that is the other that you bet Dawson and carry the some jagging. And Katuine, Titan de Yogi, Diane de Yogi, Netu de Jordan chair, and Katuina Gala, and Javanaronas, email unit, right? You think unit, Javanaronas. What it says?
Jenna.